Good day, everybody. My name is Franchesca Warren, and I am here, and I'm going to talk about making self-care a priority during COVID-19. But before we start, I want to give you a little bit of my background. I was an educator. I was a teacher, actually a high school English teacher for over 18 years. I worked as an instructional coach, district administration, and my story of burnout and of making self-care my mission was long. And if you attended the ESGI virtual conference, you know my story and you know how I got to this point. But for those who didn't, I was a teacher just like you guys, and I was spending all of my days, all of my nights, just doing everything that I thought I could to do what's best for my children. And around year 12, I started to feel the burnout. And I literally went through a journey of refinding myself and finding my purpose, which has brought me here. I reside in Atlanta, Georgia, and I have 4 children and a dog. And right now, this is an interesting fact about me is that I have taught at every grade level in high school. And also, not only that, but I have just been elected for the school board in which I sit in for my school district. And it's one of these things that I think is important for us to know, because I'm not coming here as a guru or somebody who says that, just buy this product and you will have self-care. I come to you as an educator and as a teacher who's been through it all. So we've talked about the webinar tips. You guys know that you're going to get participation, and they're going to give giveaways. I love giveaways. I love Amazon. I can shop Amazon all day. But I want us to talk about the stark reality of teacher self-care. It has been reported, if we just look at data, 85% of teachers have reported that work-life imbalance affects their ability to teach. More than 1 in 5 new teachers leave the profession within the first 5 years of teaching, and this attrition is substantially worse in high poverty schools. That's 85%. Now, this is not news for people who've been educators. We know this. But when you look at the data and you look at this, you note and you see that we are in some times that are, even before COVID, that we're trying. And now, as of March 2020, we find ourselves in a pandemic trying to figure out what do we do and how do we maintain our peace and our balance. So before I go in, I want to talk about what is teacher self-care. Lots of people, teacher self-care is the new it word. I left this out, but when I started the Teacher Self-Care Conference back in 2015, and even before that with the Educators Room, there were people who, when I talked about teacher self-care, they were like, what is that? And I was telling them that on the Educators Room, I was getting hundreds of messages a month. Teachers from all over the country, all over the world were emailing us and saying, we're overwhelmed, we're stressed, we don't have what we need. And they were at their wits' end. They were burning out left and right, tired, upset. And I remember talking to my staff and saying, we have to do something for social emotional learning of teachers, right? And the first time that I said it, one of my writers said, what do you mean social emotional learning for teachers? I said, just like we attune to the mental, the physical, and the emotional well-being of children, we have to do the same for teachers. So for just the reference today, what is teacher self-care? Teacher self-care is the intentional work educators do to attune to their physical, mental, and emotional well-being. This work includes both physical and inner work with the belief that teachers have the inherent right to be happy while educating children. That's really important, that last line. There are people in the world who will tell you, because you're a teacher, that you basically pick to be a martyr and you don't get to be happy. And that has to be disproven every chance, because you choose to be an educator, you choose this profession, you love children, you love educating, that doesn't mean that you should be unhappy for the rest of your life because you picked a career. So when you say teacher self-care, when I say it, when I'm having events, when I'm talking to teachers, when I'm talking to people, that is what I mean. We have the inherent right to be happy while educating children. And when you understand that inherent right, right, it makes you understand that everything that goes against it, you have to overturn. Now, there are people, when we talk teacher self-care, there is a self-care movement that says, hey, if you get manicures, pedicures, if you, take yourself out to eat, out to lunch, that's self-care. That is. But we're also talking about those superficial things, but also those things that are inherent where you have to go deep and you have to figure out what makes you happy and how do you, look at triggers and those things. So teacher self-care is multi-layered. It is not one thing or the other. It is literally layers of things that will make teachers inherently happy while educating children. Now, when we talk about this and we talk about what is teacher self-care, it's really important for me to talk about that we are at a time where this has become a fad word. People are selling things, people are talking about it. This has become a buzzword. But I want us to really think about the weight of teacher self-care. And I want us to look at this example. And I did this in a workshop with some teachers in Louisville, Kentucky, and I'll tell you what they did afterwards. So let's talk through it. A psychologist walked around the room while teaching stress management to an audience. As she raised the glass of water, everyone expected they'd be asked a half empty or half full question. Instead, with a smile on her face, she inquired, "How heavy is this glass of water?" Answers called out ranged from 8 ounces to 20 ounces. She replied, "The absolute weight doesn't matter. It depends on how long I hold it. If I hold it for a minute, it's not a problem. If I hold it for an hour, I have an ache in my arm. If I hold it for a day, my arm will feel numb and paralyzed. In each case, the weight of the glass doesn't change, but the longer I hold it, the heavier it becomes." She continued, "The stresses and worries in life are like that glass of water. Think about them for a while and nothing happens. Think about them for a bit longer and they begin to hurt. And if you think about them all day long, you will feel paralyzed, incapable of doing anything. Remember, put the glass down." This is what I mean by teacher self-care, right? In our jobs, we have things we don't like. We don't like that, we may not get all of our planning period or that we have to fill out all this paperwork. However, thinking about it one time or for a couple of times doesn't weigh us down. But if you continue to hold these things that make you unhappy for months, for weeks, for months, for years, it becomes unbearable. So just like in this situation where you put the glass down, we have to at some point put those stressors down that we know causes teachers to not only be unhappy, but directly contribute to our lack of self-care. When I gave this talk in Louisville, I actually had a glass of water, and I picked a teacher, said, "Hey, who wants to volunteer?" The teacher held the glass, and about 5 minutes, they started switching their arms. After about 10 minutes, they said, "How long am I going to have to hold this?" After 15 minutes, they were like, "Okay, can someone else take it?" I wanted to illustrate with them. But as we go on this self-care journey and we talk about this and we really start to look for answers, it's really important that we embrace the concept of putting our glass down. So there's a couple of reasons. Why do teachers need to practice self-care? 5 years ago when I was talking about this, no one cared. No one wanted to talk about it. People were just, it is what it is. But number one is that our jobs have increasingly become harder with more demands. Right now we're in the middle of a pandemic, and educators have been asked to solve COVID. We have been asked to put our lives on the line. We have been asked to come up with solutions that even the government cannot come up with. And so our jobs are becoming increasingly harder. And for many who aren't in education, they don't understand it because they've never been responsible for children. Well, take that responsibility of children and now Having to protect our physical and mental health, we have to find healthy ways to cope. So we need to practice. And I'm telling you this as a teacher who experienced this and who continually works on my emotional well being, is that it is so important for us to make sure that we attune to our needs. In the last 10 years, teachers that I've taught with forever have literally been going down one by one. I've had teachers who have gotten sick and had to take medical leave. I've had teachers who have fallen out at work. I've had teachers who are having to take time off because they are stressed out. All of these things that teachers are going through. And it proves to me that we have to protect our physical and mental health. And so when people ask you, why teach your self-care? Why does this matter? It matters because ultimately, if we're not healthy, then our kids aren't healthy. And if we're not attuning to it, nobody else will. I said this one time at a school in Florida, and I told them this, and I started my presentation, and I said, no one is coming to save us. No one. There's not a superintendent. There's not a school board. There's not a president. There's not a state rep. No one is going to save us until we save ourselves. And so when we talk about why do teachers need to practice self-care, we have to keep that in mind. Now, as we're going through, this is really important because this is the need. Now, as a teacher, it took me a good 10 years for me to figure out, how do I make myself a priority? How do I do it? And now couple this with COVID. So I am currently virtually learning. My kids are virtually learning. I am their teacher. I have my job and I have to maintain everything else. So my life is literally hectic. But there are things that I do on purpose to make sure that I can function and be healthy, not only for myself, but for my family. A lot of people, when they talk self-care, they look at it as a destination, right? I'm going to practice self-care because it's cool and I want to feel better. And what I've learned is that self-care is a journey. Self-care does not have an end date. And self-care is deeply personal. What works for me may not work for you, but there are a couple of things that I operate around. So the first thing is acknowledge, revolutionize, 1% rule, and take your time. These are 4 things that I do to make self-care a priority for myself and for other teachers. So let's dig deep into them. First one is acknowledge. Teachers are taught from the moment that they take hold of a classroom that if you show weakness, that you are not a good teacher or you're not effective and you may be written up. But in this self-care journey, you have to really take your time and you have to acknowledge that you need help. And this is hard. I can remember being a new teacher and having, when I was a teacher, when I started, I was 22 years old teaching 17-year-olds. And that is a lot. And when you're on your journey for self-care, you have to pause, you have to stop, and you have to acknowledge that you need help. Now, we're in COVID, and COVID has exacerbated many issues that we already knew existed in public education. And so you keep that with your regular workload. Now let's talk about all of the demands of COVID. And we are at a place where teachers are floundering. Technology, parents, just everything in between. So the first thing you need to do is to take inventory of what you're struggling with around your mental health and life. That's number 1. Take inventory. When you take inventory, that means that you have to go through and that you have to really look at where you are emotionally, mentally, and physically. At the beginning of COVID, I was running myself ragged. I was going to work from 8 o'clock until 4:35. I was coming home, getting kids, working on homework, going to different appointments. Like I just didn't have any time for myself. And what COVID did, I can remember the first week, the first day, when we abruptly went home, I can remember thinking, wow, okay, but still not out of my mode. I was still working really hard and still trying to make things happen. And I can remember a couple of days in when I realized that this might go on for like 2 more weeks, right? And I remember, and my neighborhood was so quiet because we were in lockdown, people weren't supposed to be out. And I can remember sitting here in stillness and thinking to myself, my God, like I'm sitting still. And that time, that alone time, that time where I grounded in what I was doing, it allowed me to take inventory of my life. And that was really important because I was able to say, you know what? That was pretty exhausting, me working nonstop from being up from 6:30 in the morning to 12 o'clock at night every night, getting a couple of hours sleep and waking back up and doing it again. But you have to take inventory, and it's hard. And you have to sit still to do it. You can't take inventory when you're on your way, rushing from one appointment to the next, or making this appointment. You have to sit down and sit still and take inventory. While you're taking this inventory, you have to write down what you need. This is important because sometimes you don't even realize what you need. But for me, I had to take down that I needed a breath of fresh air. I needed time to collect my thoughts. My kids needed time to really be at home without anywhere to go. And I had to write down those needs. This acknowledge phase is hard because it asks you to stop thinking about what society tells you is what we should be doing and to really think about your needs. And what I did, and this is something really, really simple, I took a paper and I folded it just like this, doubled down, and in the 4 quadrants, I went ahead and I identified mental, physical, emotional, and extra, right? And for each area, I wrote down my needs and then I designated a plan. So immediate to me, I was in this trap of getting food on the way to work. I would stop by some fast food restaurant, pick up breakfast. I would pick up lunch fast food. I would eat it on the way to work. I would get to work crazy, then get home, throw something in the oven, get ready. And I had gained 60 pounds. I was just not in a good space. And so one of the first things that I started to do in quarantine was that I started to address my physical health. And that started with me waking up in the morning, drinking tea instead of going to McDonald's or Chick-fil-A or Burger King. It also started me to start to walk. I would get up and I would walk. So every day, I would just get up and walk. Because I was getting antsy, because remember, I'm used to being out, I'm used to doing, and I'm not saying I was at home chilling, but I'm used to driving all around the city, sitting in traffic. And instead, it made me sit still. And so I had to go through and I had to really sit and take my energy and use it for something else. So I encourage you to go through and for each area, designate your plan. For me, it was physical health. So I'm drinking more water because I'm home. I'm not chugging down coffee and Coke. I'm walking every day. I'm being more purposeful. I'm saying, you know what? It probably wasn't good for my wallet or for my stomach for me to eat out every single day. And so when you acknowledge, you have to admit that you need help. And that takes a level of being comfortable with yourself, but you have to do it. I've had so many friends who are teachers who have wound up in the hospital sick, mentally and physically, because they would not even acknowledge they needed help. The next phase, revolutionize. So this is what I mean by this. Saying no is a complete sentence. As a teacher, we are told that if we're agreeable, then we're employable. I'm going to say it again. If we're agreeable, we're employable. This is something that I learned as being a female teacher. And so you get into this habit of that you say yes to almost everything. And that was a trigger for me. So as you make your plan and you think about what you're going to do, you have to find your triggers and you have to say, if I'm going to take this self-care journey seriously, I'm going to have to start saying no. And then once I start saying no, I'm going to have to find my triggers and I'm going to have to slowly but surely have a plan for how do I not get to that space. So for me, I like things done efficiently, with purpose. And so when I see something that's not happening, it was very easy for me to say, I'll just do it. It didn't matter if I had 100 things on my plate, I would just do it, right? And have 101 things. So I would have to find those triggers. And instead of me sitting in meetings and volunteering, I would sit in meetings and not say a word. This is hard when you're someone who is a control freak who wants things done right. However, I had to know that if I speak and I take something else, I would break. You also, when you're talking about being revolutionary, you have to look at what brings you joy. For me, bringing joy, being home during COVID, it really brought me joy to be in my house. To be in my house, to not have to rush in traffic. I was spending 45 minutes to an hour in traffic every day. So it brought me joy to be at home and to be in my own space and to be able to do what I thought I needed to do for my mental health. So you have to do that. You have to look at what brings you joy and do more of it. And so, during COVID, while people were upset that while people are upset that they can't get out and do what they usually have done in the past, I had to say, you know what? I'm okay if I'm in the house. I'm okay if I can't go to the grocery store. I'm okay. I have my Netflix, I have my Hulu, I have my Amazon Prime. I'll be good. And I had to look at what brought me joy. I have my children, right? I get to learn my children. That was another thing. Me not being able to volunteer for other people's mess allowed me to really be present for my children. And over these last 9 months, I have learned things about them that I did not know. As an educator, so many times we're out here and we are looking to make other people's children whole, not realizing that our own children need us. For me being home, I know exactly what type of student each one of my children are. I know what their triggers are. I know what they're going to have trouble with, and I can help them. And then number 3, saying no to anything that doesn't bring you joy. So now I have a boss who has asked me, have you thought about doing this? And I'm like, nope, I don't think it's going to bring me joy. One of the things, COVID has a lot. We have, as Americans, and just as a human, we have lost so many people to this disease. It is a horrible disease. However, one of the things that I've realized during this is that I am thankful for the small things. And when you're revolutionary and you're revolutionizing your life and what you do, it's important for you to know that. That saying no isn't a punishment, it's protection. And so I really focus on that. When I say no or someone says no, it's protection and I don't fight it. And that's important for us to remember because if you don't, once this pandemic is over and we are back on our regular lives, and you get into the trap of doing everything so fast and just picking back up the speed, you can get involved in things that don't serve you purpose. And there's nothing worse than to be committed to something or someone or something that brings you no purpose. So, I know my triggers, I know what brings me joy, and I know to say no to anything that doesn't bring me that. Now, this is my favorite. This is my favorite rule. Okay. Being better isn't a destination, it's a journey. So we have people who are working under the assumption that they have to be excellent at all times. So I have to be 100% every day. And in reality, that's not how it works. My goal has always been, and especially during this pandemic, during COVID, is for me to be 1% better. So it was very hard for me at the beginning of this pandemic for me to get up and to get things done. I just couldn't focus. I had foggy brain. It was just a lot. And then I started realizing that if I went to bed an hour earlier, if it would let me wake up an hour earlier, that's a win. So the next day I do it. And then in the morning, I wake up 30 minutes before everybody and I meditate. So this 1% rule is where you focus on being 1% better every single day. That's it. Being better isn't summative, it's formative, right? Every day we are looking at opportunities to be better. And we don't need to look at it as to sing in the pot, sing in the sky. I'll get my self-care together next year or next summer when I have off. No, I'll get my self-care together now. We're bad about that as educators. And I think a lot of it is because we know that we have summer off. And so we will say, oh, I'll work on my weight next summer, or I'll do this, or I'll do that. But during COVID, during a pandemic, God forbid if you get sick and you're not here, or, anything can happen. And so I firmly believe in this 1% rule. You have to do things to make you 1% better. When I started walking at the beginning of COVID, I was walking maybe 30 minutes. I couldn't even really do that. I was out of breath. I couldn't do anything. Now I can walk for 2 hours straight. But that's because every day I kept at it. I didn't say I'm going to be excellent today and then I'll be excellent again on Friday. Every day I said 1%. And then I kept at it. So you have to focus your efforts. I talked about making sure that you are bringing joy to situations and improvements, but you have to focus your efforts. We have learned, in the blink of an eye, we've had our state testing canceled. We've had our schedules condensed. We've said, this doesn't matter, this doesn't matter. You have to do that with your own personal life. Focus your efforts. Focus your efforts on improvement. And one of the things that I continually tell people is that if you don't focus on your efforts, then your self-care will just be a myth. So that 1% rule. So you might say, you know what, during COVID, I really want to start this business. Well, you don't wake up and you're ultimately a millionaire. And people who tell you that you do are lying. I have been in education for a long time. I own 2 businesses in education. And there will be people who will tell you, oh, I woke up and my product on Teacher Space Teachers, I sold 1 million copies of it. Or I sold 1 million copies of my book. That's not what happens. What happens is that people are intentional and they keep being better. And so knowing that, you have to focus your efforts on that. And that makes you really keep things in perspective. So lots of people in the district that I'm in, it's usually we have, some layoffs, furloughs. But honestly, right now, on this day in December, there's nothing I can do about it. All I can do is to be frugal on what I spend. All I can do is continue to work through what I have going on. And I have to keep that in perspective. Because if you worry about things that are out of your control, then that brings on more stress. So for me and my children don't have COVID. We are healthy. We have food. We have cable. And that's what I'm thankful for, right? And I have a sound mind. That 1% rule is really, really important because remember, it's a destination. It's not a destination. It's a journey. So I'm not waiting and saying, self-care, I'll do that once I leave teaching. Or no, it starts now. And it starts in increments. And it starts with you having conversations with yourself and holding yourself accountable and, becoming a learner. During this pandemic, people on Twitter, people are always talking about the books they're reading in education. And I'm not reading any books towards education, not during this pandemic, because I know that my work in the trenches is and working with other educators in the trenches is teaching me lessons that a book can never. But I am reading things for enjoyment. And I'm doing that because You have to keep things in perspective. We can't be in school mode 39 hours out of 24. And I'm being facetious, but we can't be so focused on school that we just forget everything else that brings us joy. I've been reading lately, and I've been going through, and I've been watching shows on Netflix that I never got to do when we were on regular time. I really have had a great time of refocusing on what makes me happy. So as you embrace this 1% rule, remember 1% is not 10%. It's 1%. It's tiny increments. So today it may be where you go through and that you put your graded papers, you put them up and you don't grade them today, or you only grade 2 opposed to 10. But you have to get 1% better. I think sometimes with social media, we trick people into thinking that if we're not doing what other people are doing, we're failing. And the truth is that people are figuring it out as they go. Nobody has the answers. Nobody is a guru. And just as this during a time when one person is hot or one thing is hot, the next 2 weeks there's another news cycle and something else is hot. I tell people that because a lot of times on social media, it'll make you think that if I'm not having this, if I don't do this, I'm not successful or I'm not doing things right. When in reality, social media just shows you the finished product or, the embellished product. And so you really have to know that the devil is in the details, and the details come with you being intentional every single day. Next, taking your time. I kind of expounded on this, but I talked about this a little bit, but I wanted to expound on it, is that so many times we get into traps that I've set my schedule, I've written it down, I have my notebook, I'm writing things in my notebook, but in reality, and I've written down all the things that I'm going to do and how it's going to look and what I need, and I'm very organized, and I have my planners and my highlighters, but your timetable, take it out, take your timetable that you said, I'll be good a year from now, throw it out the window. And I mean that in that healing does not have a time on it, and especially with mental health. When I was going through the worst moments of my teaching life, it took me a good year to get to a good space. And it wasn't because I was being intentional, but what I found is that time heals most wounds. And I had to really have some tough conversations with myself about what I allowed and what I did. And when I started to have those real conversations with myself, I realized that I can give myself 6 months, but it might take me a year, or it might take me 3 months or 9 months. And so I encourage people, when you're on this self-care journey, take your timetable and just throw it out. And instead of saying in a year say, with me being intentional and working on the work, in no time I will start my healing. That's important. And that's a different conversation than in 6 months I'll lose 100 pounds. Because if you do that every time, you will lose. Life is about experiences. And when you're looking at your self-care, you're maintaining during this pandemic, and you're seeing, the news cycle, all the death and gloom, and you're hearing the health professionals begging us to stay home, and then all of the political things that are happening, it's important for us to understand that we still have to live. And we don't live according to a news cycle. And so you literally have to take your timetable, literally take it and chunk it. The next part of that is don't compare yourself to others. I love social media, but I really have a love-hate relationship with it because it has become a place where people shame others because they are not where they're at. I tell you this all the time. When I started the Educators Room 7 years ago, 8 years ago, when I started the Teacher Self-Care Conference 5 years ago, it took a lot of time, I have failed more times than I have succeeded. And when I tell people, at the Educators Room, we have 45 writers, they're like, oh my God, how can I do that? And I'm like, I had to have one writer before I could have 45. I had to write one article before I could write 5,000. And so knowing that and doing that is hard. And people will try to put you on their um, timetable. And instead, don't compare yourself to them. No one tells you the hard. And I tell people this, and I say this, and I do this, and people laugh at me, but I'm like, listen, I have literally had some things. So don't compare yourself to others. Be happy. Albert Einstein said it best. He said, I'm thankful for all of those who told me no. Because of them, I learned to do it myself. And I want you to remember that, in that there will be triumphs, there will be successes, but it is not you are not in competition with anyone. And sometimes social media makes you think you are. How many followers do you have? I know people who have millions of followers who are miserable. I know people who have millions of followers who are telling you they're making this money, but they're not. And so you really have to don't compare yourself to others. Point number 3, and this is my last point, is you have to be kind to your growth. We wouldn't tell a kid who is starting to see some success, you're just so stupid. Why are you not going faster? And so we have to do the same for ourselves. We have to be kind to ourselves. We have to talk to ourselves and say, you know what, keep going. You got this. Everything's going to be okay. And once you do that for yourself and you're consistent and you train yourself to think like that, you will start to see that your mental health is taking priority. Now, we are getting to the end. We have about 5 minutes left. And I'm going to say this because I think that people need to know this. When you are talking about teacher self-care, know that your self-care may look different than the person next to you, across from you, or the person you were a week ago. But the point of it is that you be attuned to what you need, what brings you joy, and what you need to work on. And that right there is how you really make your your mental health a priority during COVID. This time has been hard for everyone. People are finding out things about themselves, about this disease, about their next door neighbors. And you have to be really grounded in what brings you happiness and that intentionality of being 1% better. I always tell people this, and I say it jokingly, but I'm so serious. COVID has reaffirmed to me that I have to be grounded in who I am and what I want to do. And so when people are saying, hey, are you doing this? Are you getting on this? No, because I'm intentional. I have a goal. I'm focused on my mental health, and this is what brings me joy, and so this is what I do. And the journey is not easy. The journey is not short. The journey is like this, like a roller coaster. But the journey is satisfying because I'm working on myself. And I'm not waiting on my school district or my principal or whoever to save me. I am saving myself. So I say that to say, I thank you guys for coming with me today. I know this has been a day where you have had children and you are just exhausted. But you can find me at 2 places. You can find me at www.theeducatorsroom.com. It is a education website. We have 45 writers, all teachers, and we write about all things education. We've been around for 8 years. We tell the truth, what others don't. And I am very proud of that organization. We have podcasts, books, all kinds of things. You can also find us on www.teacherselfcare.org. I have a Teacher Self-Care Conference. We have one that's coming up in January and one that's coming up in March. We made the decision because, remember, we're operating in joy and we are measuring impact over revenue. We have made our Teacher Self-Care Conferences free. So let me say this, we are closing up registration very soon for our January 1. We have over 1,000 people registered. And so we are going to close it very soon. So as you watch this, we will close it on December 18th, the week before Christmas. But you go ahead and register, go to the website. You can email me. I am available. I speak to district leaders. I speak to teachers. And I just do the work. And I just want to thank you guys for all that you've done. And we appreciate you. And just know that your self-care is a priority. And the work that you do today for yourself will serve you for years and decades to come. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you so much, Franchesca. This was some important work and some important messages for teachers today. So thank you so much for being with us. ESGI is proud to sponsor these webinars every month. And if you've tried ESGI in the past, please check out the new features and over 2,000 custom assessments. If you've never tried ESGI, sign up for a free 60-day trial using the promo code SelfCare. And don't forget to check your email in the next week to find a certificate of participation and a link to the recording of this webinar. And make sure you look to see if you're a prize winner. Follow ESGI's YouTube channel to watch previous webinars. We thank you for your time and have a good night.
Thank you, guys.